If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment. For more videos like this. What is the scariest, inexplicable thing that you have ever witnessed? Demonic, haunted, alien, etc. In 7th grade I was walking with some friends and we looked above a cornfield. Saw a bright light floating around. Then it started moving towards us, so we fucking booked it into the nearest neighborhood, and screamed the whole way. The rest of the night was uneventful, but the next night was my terror. I had just gotten up to go to the bathroom, and I laid back down. After about 15 minutes my entire vision blanked white. Panicking I ran out of my room and into my living room where my mom was reading. I stayed with her out there till she went to sleep, then reluctantly went back to my own room. I didn't sleep for days because of the fear of the white light. Back in 2006, some friends and I had gotten bored and decided to look up the nearest haunted locations we could go to. We discovered that one of the small bridges in the woods behind our subdivision was on the list as Crybaby Bridge. I know, every town has a fucking Crybaby Bridge. Supposedly, if you park your car on the middle of the bridge at night and get out, you can hear the ghost of the murdered baby whale. I'm sure you've heard a similar story. Despite our skepticism, we decide to go investigate. We pull up to the bridge, but parked off the bridge and to the side. We all get out and start milling about the area, listening for some cry in the dark. One fellow, Trent, starts walking out toward the bridge, and the second he reaches the center of it, the crying began. He sprinted back to us, as we all stood there in disbelief. After determining that none of us were making the sound, we tried to figure out where it was coming from, as it sounded as if a baby was crying only a few feet from us, but the cry seemed to resonate all around us. Sufficiently freaked the fuck out, we decide to bail and return with our friend Storm, a paranormal enthusiast. Since he only lived a few minutes from the area, we had hoped we could pick him up and be back before it stopped. On our way back, we were all turned around, describing everything we could remember, still gritty with excitement. About halfway down the last road before the bridge, Storm suddenly screams, "What the fuck is that?" At this, we all spin around to see the craziest, most unbelievable thing any of us had ever seen. This creature looked like an 8 to 10 feet tall, very dark-skinned man, with a bald head. Its back legs were inverted like a deer's, but were thicker than the front legs, and had what looked like hands and feet, but with elongated digits. At this moment, the thing moves onto its hind legs and leaps from the street over a hill on the other side, towards the subdivision. Seeing all of this, our driver slams on the brakes and flips a U-turn, slams onto the curb, nicks a light pole, and floors it back the way we came. Scariest moment of my life. As a kid I used to hear random voices/shouts in my house when I was completely alone. I didn't tell people for a while because I didn't want to seem crazy, but once it mentioned it, other family members told stories of my rocking chair I had as a baby rocking by itself at night, stopping only once someone came over the staircase to see why I was awake only to find an empty chair. Other times I'd lose an object, the strangest case a ski mask, for months at a time. After coming back from dinner as a family, the mask was inexplicably sitting at the doorway to my room. Everyone in my family swears they didn't put it there and had no clue where it was. Fast forward 4 years ago and my sister ends up dreaming about our house's little friend. He said his name was Ben, so that's what we called him whenever we'd notice weird things going on. Now the weirdest thing to happen was when my dog would get up, look at the front door and just growl for no reason. One day we took a picture of our staircase, and looking back at it you can pretty clearly see a shadow of a man walking up the stairs even though no one was there. I'll link to the picture if people want later, but I'm on my phone now and a long car ride so it may take some time. My mom got up one morning and felt weird. She told my dad she felt something bad had happened, so she needed to hurry up and get dressed. While in the shower my aunt called and said her mother-in-law had died. My grandmother and I also have weird premonitions that come true. My weirdest one was I called my mom to see if she wanted to go see my grandmother, her mom, who lives 30 minutes away. Told her I just woke up and felt I really needed to see her. She told me she was actually at the beach with her sister. A few minutes later we get a call. She was being rushed to the hospital because she had a heart attack. I was driving in my hometown of Lake Luzerne in the Adirondacks of New York, bigger than Vermont, or than Yellowstone, Yosemite, Grand Canyon, Glacier, and Great Smoky Mountains national parks combined. I was in the thick of it, driving down lonely forgotten roads. Where this happened, and within the next 20 miles both directions there were no buildings or cars pulled over, or cars that I'd even passed. I saw a wasp going around a bend what looked like headlights. As I drew closer I realized they were coming from inside the woods, 2 large columns of light. They were decently far in but very bright. The shadows cast on the forest were unlike anything I'd ever seen. I had such a strange mix of emotions. I just wanted to get away, When I passed the point most perpendicular to the road, I did not look at them and did not look in my rear view. I've never felt that way before again in my life. Mine is more of a you had to be there kind of story, but I'll post it anyway. When we were about 13, my cousin and I, being of scientific minds, really wanted to have a supernatural experience, so when we were in Mexico staying at our grandma's house, we decided we would sleep in the room where supposedly all the creepy shit went down. Throughout the whole vacation we would fight over beds because there was one big bed, and one fold-out bed. The big bed was obviously the most comfortable, so we decided to take turns sleeping on it. The first few days nothing happened, just your odd noise here and there, but we thought it's an old house, of course it's gonna go bump in the night. We stayed there for about a month with no ghostly interference. Obviously, we were disappointed. On our last week, it was about 2 a.m. and we were up talking about God knows what when we heard something or someone coming down the stairs leading to our room. It sounded like when a kid jumps from step to step all the way to the bottom. We looked at each other. We were obviously both scared shitless, but we didn't want to make noise. I was scared, so I said we should both sleep in the same bed. He agreed, and when I got up to walk over to his bed, the bed shook violently. It looked like we were having a major earthquake, but it was only affecting the bed. The force knocked him off the bed, and we ran upstairs like little girls. Needless to say, we didn't sleep in that room for the rest of the vacation. My first encounter was when I was around 5 or 6. I got dared to do the Blood Mary thing. So I went into the bathroom of my grandmother's house, turned off the light, stood in front of the mirror and closed my eyes, told to, and said Bloody Mary 3 times, and when I opened them I saw a red orb in the mirror, but it wasn't a mirror anymore, it was a black realm. Every time I try and recall the red orb I get a memory of a Native American woman for some reason. My mother told me once real late she was walking downstairs to get something to drink and hands started coming out of the wall to get her. Also strange because we have pictures of relatives on that wall. A wall clock flew off the wall during winter when all doors/windows were closed. I think I was attacked by an angry Christian spirit once. I was in a nun house. And I was studying for my first communion even though I'm not Christian. My nun teacher was telling me to read something, so I started. I was reading the words and changing them to be funny cause I was very bored and didn't even believe in the stuff. I said Jesus was conflicted about telling his father he was a flaming faggot, lol, and boom, instant anxiety/vertigo attack. I have never ever had either. I asked my mom to guess the number I was thinking of 0 to 10 and she got it right 7 times in a row. That's a 1 in 107 chance I think. I bet there is a ton more I just don't remember. Didn't happen to me but happened to my mom's friend who told us the story while she was visiting. As a preface, she told her 9-year-old daughter to leave the room before telling us this story. She opened her eyes up in the middle of the night, groggy and couldn't really see. She felt someone watching her. She regained focus and saw a man crouching in the corner of the room in a frog-like position. He was grinning at her. He stood up, and was about 8 feet tall. His legs were really long and his body was short compared with his legs. He proceeded to walk past the foot of her bed grinning at her the whole time. He walked right out of the room and about 4 seconds later she heard her 9-year-old daughter scream bloody murder. She rushes out of the room to her daughter who is hysterical and says between sobs, she saw a scary man walk past her door. I was at a camp for a week in the summer between my sophomore and junior year of high school. It's pretty secluded in the farmland/woods of south central PA, so there really aren't any towns or anything like that within 30 miles of the place, not really relevant to the story, just background. Anyway, one afternoon I'm laying in the field at the camp, just relaxing and enjoying the nice summer day. The grass wasn't too long, but it probably hadn't been mowed in a month or so. It was a pretty big field, and they used it for sports and other things. But, as I'm lying in the field, I shut my eyes for a few minutes, but I didn't fall asleep. It was just pretty sunny and I was tired of squinting. As my eyes are closed, I can distinctly hear the sound originating about a foot away from my left ear of footsteps running away from me into the cornfield about 100 yards away. As soon as I hear the noise of foot to my left, I open my eyes and sit up to see who was beside me, and more importantly who had snuck up on me so quietly. I sit up and I'm completely alone in the field, with nobody within 100 feet of me, certainly out of earshot. I sit up and I hear the footsteps running into the field, but with no body attached. It was much too loud to be any sort of small animal, and I would have been able to see anything larger. I have a story that happened a couple years ago. We own property in southeast Missouri, about 40 acres, that has been in my family since my dad was a kid. On the property lies a graveyard dating back to the 1800s. The graveyard was a family plot that belonged to some backwoods family that's still around. Mind you, this property is located deep in the Mark Twain National Forest and there isn't a town for many miles, and it's a tiny one at that. We would often walk to the graveyard at night as kids and walk around and look at the graves. The older kids would sometimes convince the younger kids to go up only so they could run up there early and try to scare us either on our way or while we were up there. On one such excursion we were walking up and we had just gotten to the base of the shallow hill where the graveyard resides. You could just make out some of the old graves from the bottom of the hill. As we started climbing, I saw something I will never forget. A bright bluish-white skeleton image flashed right above a tombstone and vanished in an instant. Seconds later the older kids popped up from behind the graves over to the right. No one was near the grave where I saw the flash and no one else saw the flash. I was incredibly frightened, but it was as if whatever it was preparing me for the surprise that awaited. We've taken return trips there many times and I have never seen or heard anything like it again, but the image is still fresh in my memory. A few friends and I were hanging out in the woods at this cool rock. Said rock had an X carved in it about 2x2. So we're hanging out and we all notice what we think is an oddly fluorescent blue insect flying very slow at about shoulder level. Upon closer examination, the only word I can think to classify this thing is a fairy. It was humanoid in shape and appeared to be dressed in a flowing robe or dress and had some sort of headgear or antennae. I cupped my hands around it to get a closer look, and as soon as I unclasped them a tiny bit to look at this thing, it flew straight up into the trees through my hands. I scoured the internet to see if there were any insects close to that or even the same color. There isn't. Also, my town, Carmel/Kent, New York, has a history of paranormal anomalies, including UFO sightings and unexplained stone chambers thought to be constructed by pre-Columbian Celtic druids. I'm skeptical by nature, and me and my two friends who saw it are to this day baffled by it. About 10 years ago, I was sitting in a hot tub at night in Bermuda. Yes, I know this has already become cliché. Looking up at the stars, I saw moving across the sky a small white light, like the kind of light you might expect to see from a satellite, or a meteor, or even an airplane high enough to mask its strobes. Yes, a light moving steadily across the sky at the speed I saw could have been any of those things. But if that was it, I wouldn't be telling about it here. The light moved from right to left at a satellite's pace but stopped dead in the middle of the sky. It didn't slow down, it just stopped. Then, it moved up and down, went back to center, and sat there for a second or two. Then it shot off to the upper right. There was no acceleration at all. It went from 0 to faster than a meteor instantaneously, and then just disappeared. I can't imagine what might move like that. It was definitely high in the sky, and not right in front of me. I even hesitate to say it was an alien craft, because even they have to obey the laws of physics. I was staying at a friend's apartment because we had gone to a show earlier in the day and I was just too tired to drive back home. 2 hours away, anyways. He lives in these old ass apartments in San Antonio, and we would always joke around that they are haunted because we hear shit at night. Voices coming from the restroom, doors creaking, stuff like that, but nothing that we could never explain. So around 2:30 a.m. I felt like drawing, and since he had all the good Sharpies, he was stenciling. I end up with a jumbo permanent marker that is super frayed at the tip. I was drawing a dragon, but it was coming out pretty crappy since the marker was fucked up, and took a step back to actually check it out. To my surprise, the marker was making its own little shapes and figures. I kept going, and once I was done with the dragon I drew a demonic looking face, only because we were already joking around since these evil looking drawings were showing up because of the marker. Before I was even done, I noticed there is a scene within my drawing of a man murdering a woman. But it doesn't end there. There were evil looking drawings in there. I saw piercing eyes that I had not drawn in there, a demonic face which was not even part of the one I had drawn, upside down crosses, a man hunched over, disturbing creatures, I mean a bunch of stuff. So I start freaking out, but it was mostly because it was so odd how a frayed tip made drawings of its own and all of them were evil looking. I end up handing it to a friend and ask him what he sees without even telling him what I see. He starts pointing out the exact same things I see. He has an old grandfather clock and it strikes 3, and right then he says, "God be with us." The lights turn off and turn right back on, and his rosary lays on the floor in front of us. We hear tapping on all of his windows. He quickly grabs the drawing, turns on a candle and burns it while praying. He is religious. It was some freaky shit, let me tell you. I haven't stayed over since then. When I was a kid, I lived down the street from Lake Accottincan, Virginia. Okay, I guess to be clear I didn't, but one of the trails to get to the lake was about 5 minutes from the house. I used to go there all the time with my father and feed the ducks and walk around the lake and that sort of thing. Well, one day I decided to take a walk over to the lake. The walk over to the lake was about an hour and 15 minutes. This isn't a bad walk by any means. Most of it is covered by trees, so it's not super hot or anything. So by the time I get to the lake it's basically dusk. I get a drink from one of the machines, check out the ducks and head home. The walk back wasn't bad, but at this point it was very dark out and very dark in the trail. As I'm walking along I feel something to my right. You know how if you put your hand a half inch from someone's back they can feel your hand there? The nearest thing I can compare it to is off this goofy anime me my nieces and nephews watch called Bleach. In this show they go on and on about feeling someone's spiritual pressure. When I first heard them say that I thought back to this night at Lake Akotink when I was 15. Well, I can feel something off to my right and it stops me dead in my tracks and I look into the forest. The way this trail works is it snakes through the woods along the lake a good bit. I can hear where the lake is slapping against the shoreline and all that. But as I'm feeling whatever is over there I start to make out the head and shoulders of a man. At this point my mouth goes completely dry and all my hair is sticking up on end. It's not like, oh a spider is on my shoulder, boom, goosebumps. This was like needles all over goosebumps. And to use another anime reference, it felt like someone with a lot of spiritual pressure was standing over there. In this show it's like the atmosphere gets heavy. I was paralyzed with holy fucking shit. Finally my nervous system gets back in gear after my brain has been screaming move for the past 20 seconds and I keep walking. I didn't look backwards once the entire way home. When I came through the door at home I didn't say a thing to my father, which was odd for me since I got home at like 8:45. He asked me what was up and I told him what happened. He then tells me that that's common for that area because the entire area was occupied by different people during the Civil War. Scared the ever-living shit out of me. I've never been more scared in my life than those 20 seconds, and I've seen some fuck up shit in my short life. When I was little, maybe 7 or 8, my house had a huge mirror in the hallway. The mirror covered a set of sliding closet doors where we kept all of our beach stuff when we weren't using it. Well, on this particular night, my parents had long since fallen asleep and my brother, being 2 years old at the time, was not privy to waking up for anything. It must have been near midnight or so, and I just finished my late night of watching cartoons. I was headed up the stairs in the dark, so as not to wake my parents, when I stopped in front of the mirror. I had never seen my reflection in the dark before, and I was fascinated by it. I just stood there standing at the mirror for what seemed like forever. Everything about me looked different, and honestly I couldn't tell that it was me. Then I'm not sure why this happened, but this feeling came over me where I had this insatiable urge to do a little jig while giggling manically. Suddenly, my reflection changed. As I was doing this creepy little dance and laughing to myself in the dark, my reflection changed. It was not me I was looking at. What I was looking at had black, empty eyes and teeth that were far too big for its mouth, and this look of wild glee on its face. It was dancing along with me, but not the exact same motions I was doing. Yes, that's right, whatever was in the mirror was dancing with me. After I realized what was happening, I flew with all the force that adrenaline can provide an 8-year-old, into bed under my covers, pulled out my Game Boy and played until the batteries died. I could not look in that mirror for 3 months, still don't know what the f that was. Well, okay. In our living room, there is this massive picture window that faces east. It has been there for the duration of my life. Outside, there is a clear view of the trees and the sky. Typical, right? Probably around 2 to 3 years ago, there was this thing that would start appearing at random times in the sky. I'm talking, it didn't matter whether it was cloudy or clear, snowing or raining, windy as all fuck or thunderstorming. None of that seems to matter. It appears at any point from like 8 p.m. to 2 a.m. It's about the shape/size of a star except it flashes, very fast, red, blue, white, not necessarily in that order, and very very slowly moves up to the point where I can't see it because the porch roof blocks it. The thing is, it doesn't appear every night. It has appeared while cloudy, raining, snowing, clear, as I said, none of that affects it, so it seems. I don't know if this is a planet or a star or something. I have no idea what it is and I can't seem to find a plausible explanation for it on the internet or from anyone I know. Creeps me out. I don't sit in front of the window when it's there because it bothers me. Plus, I hate the dark. On top of that, there's also this random noise that sounds like an airplane is very very close by. It's not mega loud but it's about moderate that happens every single night, except planes don't fly over this area and when they do, it is never that loud. It's not vehicles going by and it isn't any sort of man-made noise, so it seems. Happens every night, it's noticeable except my mother claims she has never noticed it. Weird. My friends have heard it on Skype before. Planes are not that loud. Any time from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. it has happened. I also can't find an explanation for this. Wasn't me but was a bunch of my buddies, so I'll relate it as I was told. So 3 of my friends were driving back from a neighboring town one night. It's pretty late. My friend had a typical teenage boy racer car, ridiculously loud exhaust for a small car, huge subwoofer and a pretty high-end sound system. So they come to a long straight and my friend, being a young man in his first car, opens it up and books it down the straight. So they're flying along doing like 80 miles per hour, engine/exhaust roaring with drum and bass blasting full volume. Despite all the noise of the car/music, they hear a whoop 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 noise coming from above the car and a thump on the roof. They all look at each other as if to say, "Did you hear that?" And my friend turns the music down. They can hear a scraping, grinding noise coming from the roof. When they get into town, they pull over and my friend who was driving tells the guy in the bitch rack to get out and check. Needless to say, they are all shitting it and the dude in the back is like, "Shit, you check." So after some bickering, one of them sticks his head out and there is nothing there. It may not sound too creepy, but what made it so for me was I know the three guys involved pretty well, and none of whom are the kind to make shit up or scare easily. The driver especially, whom I have been best mates with since we were little kids, is not one to tell bullshit ghost stories/even believe in paranormal shit, and is usually the first to go investigate if someone hears something go bump in the night if we are hanging out. But he openly admitted to me, despite knowing I would rip him for it, that he was terrified and is certain there was a gargoyle or some shit on the roof of his car, lol. So I lived in this house tucked behind a couple other houses on the neighborhood. When we first moved in, first thing I did was check out the backyard, being about 10 or so and loving to chill in my backyard. Now it looked more like animals had been kept there because there were so many fences. I thought I was strange and thought nothing of it. Here was even a large tree right on the center. About 3 months and I found an odd stone with a smooth side. On it was a name of, I presume to be a girl, with birth and death years and the acronym RIP, though my memory of this is fuzzy. I'm certain it was during the years of the previous owners. I was kind of freaked out by this and so put the stone down on the ground and went on to play and go about my normal life. A few days later, my bedroom overlooked the backyard BTW. I was about to go to bed when I swear I saw a green, human-sized ghost standing right where that stone was, and after a few seconds it disappeared. I looked out every night hoping to see it again but never did. To this day I still get freaked out thinking about it. In fact, I'm getting some serious chills down my spine, even thought it's 80+ degrees. And that has been my only real I know what the crap I was encounter with held unknown. I live in a small little nothing town on Long Island. Recently heroin had become available in my town. I'm no prude, I've tried every drug under the sun, except for heroin. I mean, in high school if you held a gun to my head and said find me heroin or else, I'd be Saul. Not more than 2 to 3 years past my graduation it blew my mind how easy it was to find heroin in high school. Anyway, enough with this little preamble. A couple of blocks away from my house a kid was throwing a party while his parents were out of town or whatever. A girl there OD'd on heroin and died on this kid's couch in his garage. She was like 16, so it was really sad, stupid but sad. Anyhow, I had to drive past this house every day when I was coming home. It was late, not more than a week since she died. I was coming back from a friend's house or something, I can't really remember. What I'll never forget is all the sudden feeling cold, as well my whole body felt like there was pins and needles in it. My heart raced and I knew something wasn't right. I looked in my rear view mirror and I swear to you I saw the girl's face. She was in my back seat looking sad. Eventually it just drifted away. Now I've never met the girl before she died, nor did I even know she existed. Also, I'm not one to believe in supernatural stuff, it just doesn't have any logic base to it. But I swear something extraordinary happened that night. My husband and I were having an intimate moment when I looked up at him and saw a silhouette of black wings behind him. The room was partially dark and I thought maybe I was just seeing shadows, so I closed my eyes for a few moments. I opened them again and the silhouette was still there, and then suddenly they seemed to flutter. I screamed and shoved him off me, yelling, "What is it? What is it?" I told him what I saw and he thought I was completely nuts. I have never seen anything like it again and never seen anything like it before. A few weeks after this incident I found out my 33-year-old husband was having an affair with a 17-year-old girl. I was going to church at the time and was so rattled I spoke to the pastor and he told me it was more than likely a manifestation of a demon who was influencing my husband at the time. We divorced and he married the girl once she turned 18. He's been married a few times since her as well. To this day I don't know what I saw, I just know it scared me, and due to behaviors he was exhibiting at the time, and after finding out he was cheating, I do believe he was no longer the man I had married. One odd little note. We had kids at the time and one night they were outside after dark and they came running and screaming and I asked what was wrong. My son said there was something in the tree with red eyes staring at them and then it flew away. He said when it flew away it didn't look like a bird. They had no idea what had transpired between their dad and I. Okay, here we go. Story number 1. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was diagnosed with cancer in 1997. She was given 6 to 12 months to live, but she was a fighter and fought it for 2 years. In the months before she died, but before hospice care, she was staying at a hospital near my hometown. My dad would obviously visit her on an almost daily basis. This hospital had a parking ramp, and so my dad would always get receipts, but never kept them. He would always throw them away. After being in the hospital for several months, my grandma was moved to hospice care when she only had about a month or two to live. She died December 23, 1999. When spring came that year, my dad cleaned the garage as he usually does every spring. At the time my dad smoked, so he had a coffee can of cigarette butts that he would empty his ashtray into on occasion. When he was cleaning the garage, he emptied the can, rinsed it out, and put it back on his workbench. The next day he went to empty his ashtray into the can only to find, sitting at the bottom of the can, his parking receipt from the very last day my grandma was at the hospital, the day they moved her into hospice care. Story number 2. Our family dog at the time absolutely loved my grandma. Our dog would sleep in my room every night. After my grandma died, about once every month or two, I would wake up in the middle of the night to my dog starting at a wall or corner in my bedroom. He had never done this prior to my grandma's death. Typically after staring for a minute or so, he would relax and start wagging his tail, even sometimes as much as laying on his side and raising his legs as if to be given a belly rub. After a minute or two of that he would go back to sleep. To a lot of people, that might freak them out. To me, it was calming. I knew my grandma was coming to visit us and check in on us, so it never really bothered me. This went on for several years until I graduated high school and moved out. After I moved out, our dog slept in my parents' bedroom and it stopped happening. When I was a teenager, my family went to a cabin/hotel resort in a country/forested area, and we brought one of my friends along with us during one of our summer trips. One night my friend and I were leaving the swimming pool area and had to walk back to our cabin, a good 5-minute walk, and we were crossing the parking lot area towards the pathway leading to the cabins when it got suddenly quiet. Wind died down, all the forest insects/animals stopped making noise, and overhead something huge with bright lights flew directly over the top of the trees, and next thing we knew, my friend and I were standing directly in front of our cabin's door, and we were completely dried off. We were still wet from the pool when walking back. We were both pretty disoriented and didn't understand how we got back so fast and how we were completely dry. When I was an apprentice, my bosses used to treat me like absolute shit. And my older, male workmates, I was only 17, and very naive, okay, stupid, so basically I thought I had to do all the shitty jobs they asked me to regardless of how humiliating they were. Seriously, they used to make me make printing plates for hours, by hand, sometimes up to 250 a day, pick sellotape up off the carpet, clean the toilets, walk down the road to pick up 8A1 printing plates and carry them back by hand, etc. And when I wasn't doing horrible jobs, they would ridicule me for being a trainee. I was pretty stuck in this job, as things weren't working out for me at home, and I had to pay rent in order to live away from my parents. One day it was about 2 p.m., and I had been on shift since 6 a.m. making plates and doing other crappy stuff, when my boss came in and said quietly, "I know you thought you were going home early today, but I just got a job and that I want you to finish before you go." He started to laugh. "It's 90 plates and I need them done today." The other dude I worked with, let's call him Cockface, he sniggered as well. Meanwhile I nearly cried. I wanted to get out of there so badly. Then my boss left, and I was standing there with Cockface while he said to me, "Well, you better get started on them plates." I couldn't think of anything to do. I was paralyzed by misery, that's what it felt like. So, I held on to the quartz crystal necklace my great aunt had given me, and call it whatever you like, desperation, coincidence, karma, magic, the force, I don't know what the f it was either, but I just willed something big to happen. I mean, I felt the power of my hate for this place and all things in it, and what they were doing to me, and I tried to project it outside of me in that small terrible instant. Suddenly all the lights in the building go down, burglar alarms start going off all over the street, and the town where we are. The whole place is silent and black, apart from the alarm sounds. My heart was racing, I can tell you right now, and I was shaking. What in the fuckery just happened? About half an hour passed, still no power. Anyone who works in the printing industry can testify to the fact that you cannot work without power. 45 minutes go by, and my boss rings and says, "Fuck it, someone's hit a transformer up in Hillsborough and there's going to be no power for up to 6 hours. You guys will have to go home, no point being here now." Oh, righteous joy. I just about danced my way out to the car. On the way home I was on a high. What the hell just happened? Did I somehow do that? Or was that some sort of amazing, freaky coincidence? I'm still shaking when I decide to test it again, by looking at a tractor mowing the verges on the motorway, and trying to recreate that same power feeling. Suddenly the tractor moves quickly to the side, slips off the curb, and the massive blade snaps in half and goes flying across the grass and onto the road. I almost stopped breathing, decided that there was something serious going on here today, and that even though I was grateful to be away from my hellish workplace, I was never going to do that again. True story. I have a few. Only one happened to me, but most were in my close family and based around my uncle that died 12 or so years ago. My nephew was still really young when my uncle died, not even 2, probably, and I was just 10 myself. I remember my sisters and I crying, holding one another on the floor when we got the news. My nephew thought it was a game and started laughing and hugging us. A few weeks later my mom and I went to my uncle's house to clean and remove his stuff. I sat there alone in his living room. My mom had gone outside for a moment. I remember watching the dust particles drifting through the beams of light as a weird sensation that I was not alone washed over me. "Hey bud," I heard from the seat next to me, in what I swear was my uncle's voice. Being 10, I flipped shit and ran from the house. I refused to go back in after that and waited in the car. Fast forward a couple years and my nephew was 4 or so, out in the yard hanging out with my dad. My dad was trying to work on his boat engine and my nephew was being a little kid, getting in the way and stuff. My nephew was preoccupied with something in my dad's shed, so my dad told him to stay there as he went over to the side yard to get something off of the boat. My dad was gone for a couple minutes and as he rounded the corner, he heard my nephew talking. Not babbling mindlessly as kids are apt to do, but having a conversation. My dad got a chill down his spine. "Who were you talking to, buddy?" my dad asked. "Your brother." My dad was taken aback, but assumed he was talking about Ray, my dad's only living brother. "Who, Uncle Ray?" "No. Brian." My dad is not superstitious, but he lost it. My nephew had never really met my uncle, except perhaps when he was less than a year old, and we had never really talked about him. My sister claims she was sitting alone in her room once and got an odd feeling. From her description it was a lot like the one I got at my uncle's house, and heard "hey kiddo," a term he'd used when referring to her. The last one was on the anniversary of my uncle's death one year. We were comforting my grandma, talking about my uncle when a picture of him fell off of a dresser. It didn't just fall straight down, but acted as though someone had hit it or thrown it with force. It flew a few feet before hitting the ground. Weird shit. So growing up I have had lots of encounters with demons. I've heard them whispering in my room when I wake up in the middle of the night and had plenty of times when they would attack me. It got so bad that I could barely sleep at night and always had to sleep with the lights on. One of my encounters is when I awoke to a demon lying in the bed next to me. He had bluish gray skin, was skinny, and had a large head with these distinct large wide eyes. When I grabbed him around the neck, his skin felt like a lizard's but was ice cold. I told him to go away or God would hurt him. He ran off. When I awoke later on, around 6 a.m., I got up and went to the bathroom. I was wide awake by the time I was finished using the bathroom. I was coming through my door, which faces directly in front of my windows, and I saw this tall black figure that had the shape of the demon's head that I saw earlier. I ran off into my mom's room and did not leave. Another story was when I saw this black shadowy figure running through my brother's room. Later that evening when my brother was sleeping he woke up to the same black figure trying to pull him out of the bed. He said he prayed and the demon left. Another time I was bothered by 2 demons in the same night. The first one had more of cynical type of evil. He was tall, had an oblong looking head, and was red. He scratched me, bit me, basically just tried to hurt me. He eventually left once I called upon the name of Jesus for him to leave me alone. When I woke up again later that night I heard footsteps running on the concrete sidewalk, which is like 5 feet away from my window, outside my window. It was very clear somebody was running on the sidewalk. Then I heard the demon, I already assumed I knew what it was, go up to out back door, which is right next to my window but in another room, knock on the door. He then ran off onto the sidewalk and ran off. Somehow I managed to go back to sleep but then I awoke to another demon. This demon was different. He was tall, wide and black and had this kind of like he was retarded laugh, not trying to offend anyone. He began pulling pony hair and tried pulling me out of the bed. I called upon Jesus again and the demon screamed, so loud it made my ears ring, and ran away. Through my experiences I have no doubts that there is a God. He has saved me numerous times from the evil I encountered and deserves my respect and acknowledgement. I was about 13, visiting my aunt and uncle in Ohio. I learned of a haunted bridge near them. A small bridge on Maud Hughes Road, that went over a set of train tracks. The story goes, mix of urban legends and a supposedly real story, couple stopped on the bridge, and were inexplicably killed, and found hanging by their necks above the tracks. Another story says a mother killed her infant there and then hung herself. They say if you go there at night, you can hear screams or even conversations between two people. People also say they've seen floating lights and human-shaped figures. I had a real interest in the supernatural at that time, for some reason, aliens, ghosts, etc., and I told my parents about it. My dad and uncle wanted to take me there to check it out, because they like a good thrill too. We drove a good 30 minutes out of town to the bridge, real late at night. Maybe 11:30 or midnight. Very deep in the back country, hadn't seen another car the whole night. We finally found the bridge, and stopped right on it, above the tracks. I had a small disposable camera with me, had learned sometimes orbs could be seen in photos taken in a haunted area. I snapped a few photos of the darkness and the trees. Then we just sat and listened. Didn't hear anything. It was unnaturally quiet, though. Being fairly close to the suburbs, and only a short drive from Cincinnati, it was always fairly loud even at night. But this was unnervingly silent. I was seated on the passenger side, looking towards the city lights. The woods made a bottleneck about 100 yards down the tracks that ran beneath the bridge, and it went right over the crest of the hill. Again, maybe 100 yards away, woods on either side silhouetted by the city lights. Literally on the tracks, between the woods on either side of this crest on the hill, I saw this tall, black shape pacing. Pacing. Back and forth, back and forth. It was human-shaped, even 100 yards away I could tell that. I pointed it out to my uncle and my dad. They noticed it too. It moved back and forth, at an uneven pace. It wasn't steady. We got seriously spooked, and started the car. The moment the car started, the shape stopped dead middle of the tracks, and just lingered there. Like it was looking at us. I don't know if it started moving towards us or away from us, but it most definitely began moving very quickly down the tracks. I got scared shitless it was coming towards us. My uncle put the car in drive, and we left. The next day, I got the photos developed. Shit you not, orbs. Green and blue orbs, floating in complete darkness. Even stranger? Mist. Or smoke. I don't know what to call it. But it was green, and looked like cigarette smoke. I took about 9 pictures, and these things were in about 7 of them.